A newborn takes its first breath. Within the hour, that baby has been held by 13 different people. Not in a hospital, not in some strange experiment. This is an ordinary birth in an ancient human camp, and almost none of those 13 pairs of hands belong to the mother. Sounds wrong, doesn't it? Everything in you says a baby belongs to its mother, that the bond between one woman and one child is the oldest, most sacred thing in the world. But for almost all of human history, that's not how a child was raised, not by one mother, not by two parents, by a crowd. No nursery, no daycare, no nanny. And somehow ancient humans raised children better than we do, with less stress, fewer breakdowns, and a child who was never, not for 1 minute, truly alone. Picture the opposite for a second. A single baby in a single quiet room behind a closed door with one exhausted adult. To us, that's just Tuesday. To an ancient human, that scene would have looked like a death sentence. By the end of this, you'll understand why raising a kid today can feel so crushing, so isolating, so impossible, even with everything we have. And here's the part to hold onto, because we'll come back to it. In that ancient camp, there was one person who mattered to a child's survival more than its own mother. You'd never guess who. Let's start with the lie we all believe. The lie is the lone mother, the image of one woman, alone, carrying the entire weight of a child on her own two shoulders. We treat that as natural, as the default setting of motherhood. It is the opposite. It is one of the strangest, newest arrangements our species has ever tried. Go and watch how a baby is born among the Aka and the Afay forager peoples in the rainforests of Central Africa, whose way of life is the closest living window we have into our deep past. A baby is born, and almost immediately it starts moving through hands. The grandmother, an aunt, a sister, a cousin, a woman from the next shelter who isn't related at all. Anthropologists who counted have watched a single infant be held by up to 14 different people in its first hours of life. And it doesn't stop after the first day. In some forager bands, roughly half of all the holding, carrying, soothing, and caring for a baby is done by someone who is not the mother. Half. The mother is central, yes, but she is one node in a web, not the whole web. Picture what that actually means for the child. You are never put down in an empty room. You are never left to cry yourself to sleep alone. There is always a body, warm, breathing, familiar, within arm's reach. From your very first hour on Earth, your nervous system learns one thing as a fact as solid as the ground: I am surrounded, I am safe, someone always comes. But here's the part that's actually insane. This isn't just a nice cultural habit. It's written into our biology. Our bodies physically cannot do it the other way. Here's the math that should not work. A human mother living the ancient way gives birth roughly every 2 to 3 years. That sounds normal to us. It should not. Look at our closest relatives. A chimpanzee mother waits 4 years between babies. An orangutan waits up to 8 years for a single offspring, because she carries and feeds that one child almost entirely by herself until it can survive on its own. We do it in less than half the time. Why? How can a human mother possibly support a toddler, a newborn, and her own survival all at once, in a world with no formula, no jars of baby food, no shops? She can't, that's the answer. She physically cannot, and she was never meant to. A human child is breastfed for 3, sometimes 4 years, but the mother stops nursing long before the child can feed itself out in the wild. So who fills that gap? Who feeds a 4-year-old who can't yet dig a root or crack a nut or bring down an animal? Everyone else does. The weaned child is handed, quite literally, to the rest of the group to keep alive. This is the trade our species made deep in the past, and it changed everything. We sped up. We had more children closer together than any ape has any right to, and we could only get away with it because we never raised them alone. The short gap between human babies is not a sign that mothers are superhuman. It's proof, hard biological proof, that they always had help. Take the help away and the whole system groans. Which, if you've ever been a parent staring at a ceiling at 3 in the morning with no one to hand the baby to, you already know in your bones. And there was so much that could go wrong. This was a world with no antibiotics, no vaccines, no hospital down the road. In many ancient populations, researchers estimate something close to 4 in 10 children died before they reached 15. Sit with that number. Nearly half. Every single adult standing in that camp was a survivor of a gauntlet that took half their childhood friends. And the thing that pulled a child through that gauntlet more than anything else wasn't strength or luck. It was hands. The more people invested in keeping you alive, the better your odds. A child with a whole band behind it lived. A child with no one did not. And it gets stranger, because some of the most important caregivers in an ancient camp weren't adults at all. They were other children. In a modern home, a child is the project, the center of gravity. Everything orbits the kid, the schedule, the meals, the worry. In an ancient band, a child stepped out of the shelter and into something we've almost completely lost, the mixed-age pack. Picture it, a loose, roaming group of kids, a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, a near-grown teenager moving together at the edge of camp, half playing, half working with no adult hovering over them. The older ones carried the younger ones on their hips. The teenagers taught the small ones which berries meant food and which meant death. A girl of 8 might be the main caregiver for her baby brother for hours at a stretch while the adults were out gathering. This is how a human child actually learned to be human. Not from a teacher at a board, not from a screen, by doing, by watching the kid 2 years older than them and copying, failing, copying again. They learned to use a knife by being handed a real one far younger than we'd ever allow. They learned to track, to dig, to read the sky, to soothe a crying baby, because one day soon a crying baby would be theirs to soothe. Now think about that. By the time an ancient girl had her own first child, she had already spent her entire childhood holding, feeding, and minding other people's babies. She had years of practice. She arrived at motherhood already knowing what to do. Compare that to now. Most new parents in the modern world have never held a newborn before the one the nurse places in their arms. We hand the most demanding job a human being can do to people who have had zero training. Then we put them in a quiet apartment, close the door, and wonder why they're terrified. We didn't just lose the village. We lost the apprenticeship that used to come before parenthood, the years of practice on other people's kids that made the real thing feel survivable. Stay with me because this next part flips everything you assume about discipline. If a whole band raised a child, you'd expect chaos, 20 people barking 20 different orders, a kid getting smacked from every direction. The reality was almost the exact opposite. Anthropologists who lived with forager groups kept noticing the same startling thing. Adults almost never hit their children, they rarely even gave direct commands. A small child in an ancient camp had a kind of freedom that would horrify a modern parent. They wandered, they played near the fire, they picked up sharp tools, and the adults mostly let them watching from the edge of their vision, stepping in only when the danger was real. Because here was the logic, even if no one ever spoke it out loud. A child who learns by being ordered around learns to wait for orders. A child who learns by trying, failing, and getting a small burn or a small cut learns something far more useful out in a world that will try to kill them. They learn to read danger for themselves. You don't survive a wilderness by obeying. You survive it by paying attention. So ancient parents grew that attention the only way it can be grown. They let the child live a little closer to the edge than we ever would. And punishment, the way we think of it, barely existed. No timeouts, no raised hand, no shame. When a child did something wrong, the correction usually came not as a blow but as a story, a joke, a quiet word from someone the child loved, or simply the natural result of the mistake itself. A kid who refused to share found soon enough that others stopped sharing with them. The group itself was the lesson. The whole band, every day, was teaching every child what it meant to belong to people who needed each other. Now hold that against the way we do it. We isolate 1 or 2 stressed adults with a child, strip away the 20 other models the kid was meant to learn from, and then expect those exhausted parents to be the entire moral universe, teacher, disciplinarian, playmate, and provider all at once with no relief. It's no wonder it feels like too much. It was always supposed to be spread across a whole village of shoulders. Here's what nobody tells you about all this. We tend to imagine the ancient mother doing it all because the men were off being hunters, distant and uninvolved. Strangers to their own kids. That picture is almost completely backwards. Go back to the Aka in that Central African forest. Anthropologists studying Aka fathers found something that stunned them. Aka dads hold their infants more than fathers in any other society ever measured. Within arm's reach of their baby nearly half of the entire day. They'll hold a child while they talk, while they rest, while they work. A child cries in the night, and it's often the father, not the mother, who pulls it close, presses it to his chest, and rocks it back to sleep so she can rest. And it stretches beyond the parents entirely. A hungry child in an ancient camp did not go to its mother and only its mother. It went to whoever had food. An uncle would drop a piece of meat into a kid's hands. An older woman with no children of her own would share her roots. When a hunter brought down an animal, that meat didn't feed one family, it moved across the whole band, hand to hand, and the children were fed from it first. The entire group ran on a quiet, constant net of sharing, and a child grew up inside that net, catching food from a dozen directions, never depending on just one source that could fail. So let's kill the myth completely. This isn't a story about one heroic mother doing everything. This isn't a story about absent fathers and distant men. This is a story about a whole group of people, related and unrelated, old and young, male and female, deciding without ever deciding that every child belonged to all of them. Which brings us finally to the person I promised you at the start, the one who mattered to a child's survival more than its own mother. It wasn't the father, it wasn't the strongest hunter, it was the old woman by the fire, the grandmother. And to understand why, you have to look at one of the strangest facts about the human body, one we barely ever question. Almost every animal on Earth stays fertile until it dies. A female chimp can have babies into her final years, but human women stop having children decades before their lives end. Menopause, we treat it as a simple winding down, a body running out, but step back and it makes no evolutionary sense at all. Why would nature switch off a woman's ability to have her own children while leaving her strong, sharp, and alive for 20, 30 more years? Evolution is brutal about waste. It does not keep a body running for decades for no reason. So there must be a reason, and there is. This is the grandmother hypothesis, and it reshapes how you see your whole family tree. The idea is this: a woman past childbearing age is freed from the brutal cycle of pregnancy and nursing, and all that freed up energy, all that experience gets poured into her grandchildren. Watch the Hadza in the dry savanna of Tanzania. The hardest working people in many of their camps by hours are not the young mothers. They're the grandmothers out under the sun, digging deep tubers out of rocky ground, food that small children can't get for themselves, then carrying it back to feed those grandchildren. Grandmother who lived longer and worked harder meant grandchildren who survived. Those grandchildren carried her genes, including the genes for living long past your last baby. And so, generation after generation, our species selected for the long-lived grandmother. Your own lifespan, the decades you may get after 50, might be a gift handed down from ancient women who refused to stop feeding their families. Menopause isn't your body failing. It might be your body switching jobs. But that's not even the strangest part. Because of all this, a human child grew up inside something almost no other animal ever gets. Overlapping generations, all alive at once, all invested in keeping you breathing. A mother, a father holding you half the day, a pack of older kids teaching you the world, aunts and uncles and unrelated adults slipping you food, and a grandmother, fierce and tireless, digging the ground to keep you fed. No isolation, no closed door, no one carrying it all alone. A child was born into a living net of people, and that net was the single greatest survival technology our species ever invented. Not fire, not the spear, the village. So here's where it leaves us. Here's the part that should sit a little heavy. For 300,000 years, raising a child was something a whole group of people did together. 20 pairs of hands, bodies everywhere, help that never had to be asked for because it was simply always there. Then in a flash of history, a couple of centuries nothing, we took that child and that mother and that father and we sealed them in a house. Alone, we called it independence, we called it privacy, we called it the modern family, and we quietly deleted the village. We kept the love, we kept the instinct, we kept every ancient expectation a parent's body and brain were built with. We just removed the 20 people who were supposed to be standing around them. So if you're a parent, and you love your kid more than your own life, and you still find yourself exhausted, snapping, drowning, lying awake, feeling like you're somehow failing at the most natural thing in the world, understand what's actually happening. You are not weak, you are not broken, you are running ancient software that expects 20 helping hands on a life that gave you 2. The loneliness you feel isn't a flaw in you, it's a feature that's gone missing from the world around you. We didn't get worse at raising children, we just got lonelier doing it. So tell me this, growing up, who was your village? The grandmother who half-raised you, the aunt down the street, the older cousin who taught you everything? Or did you, like so many of us, grow up behind a closed door with 2 tired hands doing the work of 20? Tell me below, I read every one of these. And if this rewired the way you see your own family, even a little, subscribe. There's a lot more hiding in our past where this came from.